What's up, everybody? Welcome to the 24th level of the PlayStation Drive. I don't know why I said the level, because that's usually the RPG Cave thing. I'm one of your hosts, Ryan Turford, and I'm joined, as always, by the man himself, Matt Sawinski. Matt, how are you doing on this lovely, lovely Thursday morning?
I'm doing well, Ryan. I'm in a bit of a crossroads right now because I can't see you on Discord, but I have the YouTube pulled up so I can see you there.
Yeah.
So it totally works out. It's breaking my brain a little bit, but I'm having fun with it. How are you doing?
Good. Especially because you get to see me on a delay there more than anything. So it's gonna just totally be fine. I swear, it's gonna be totally fine. But of course, this is the show where we talk about PlayStation all the time, and we're actually doing it a bit different because Extra Life is happening right now at the time that you're listening to this, and it's happening all weekend. So we're actually recording the show live. So again, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, listeners in chat, if you have questions for us that are PlayStation related, leave them in the chat. We'll answer them when we get to the questions part of the show. But also, if you're listening on audio feeds, of course, you can subscribe to us on your audio podcast feed of choice. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify. We're on all the things, so check us out there. You can also find us on YouTube if you want to see our beautiful faces every single week. Head on over to youtube.com/YouMeCapri. We put up a full video version of the show every single Friday. It might be late this week. I mean, it's part of the live stream that we're doing, but it might take me a little bit longer to cut it out of the show and put it up on its own. But it'll be there as well as it is there every single week. And of course, like, subscribe, share with all your friends, all that good stuff that people on YouTube tell you to do. Last but not least, of course, if you want early access to this and all of our shows, head on over to Patreon. Patreon.com/YouMeCapri is how you do that. There's a little tip in the old tip jar, and out comes content. You get early access to the show, as well as a new episode of the You Me Capri podcast that we recorded together in person, Matt, that's live now for patrons. So you can check us out there, which was a really fun experience that we did as well. So last but not least, Extra Life is happening right now, as I mentioned. So I'm live on YouTube, and by the time you're listening to this, my live stream will be over. However, Sean Capri will be in Rome, New York this weekend in person for Extra Life 2021 with our team Phoenix Overdrive. So you can check out Sean's stream over on twitch.tv/Sean Capri starting on, I think he's starting Saturday morning at like 10 or noon. I can't remember the exact time off the top of my head. I'll post it. We'll have it on Twitter, so you can check out the exact schedule there as well. And he's going to be streaming for 24 hours. I've also left our donation links in the show notes because we're all raising money for charity. You, me, as well as Sean. So I think you and I are both raising the same money, like money for the same charity, because I think we're both raising money for sick kids, I'm guessing. And then
yes, sir.
Sean is raising money for the Stollery Children's Hospital out in Alberta. So you can check us out in the show notes if you feel so inclined to donate as well. Also, if any donations come in while we're doing the live stream, we actually don't have the tracker up at the moment, so I'll get to those after the recording is over. All right, Matt, let's grab our 8 tracks, pop them in. It is time for the playlist, and it's time to talk about the things we played this week. So, Matt, go first. I know you've probably been sinking all your time into one particular game, well, another game that's on Xbox, but we don't need to talk about that here unless you want to. What have you been playing, my friend?
Yeah, so I was a little bit busy with another review on Xbox. So the time that I spent the most with was Guardians of the Galaxy. Ryan, I cannot tell you how much this game continues to surprise me. The emotional depth that comes along with some of these stories is something I was not expecting out of a Guardian story. Like we see a lot of hints of it, especially in the movies, but like a lot of the, backstory for a lot of these characters is surprisingly dark and messed up. And, the game is actually going into it. It deals with grief and trauma in a really, really fun and interesting way. Well, not fun, maybe fun is not the right word for it, but it's really, really well handled. And I mentioned before that this may be my favorite iteration of the team, and I think I can stamp that now. I love them more than I do the what's it called, the movie versions of the characters. I like them more than the comics versions of the characters. They fall into this weird in between of both, but everything about them just works. They're fun to talk to. They're fun to listen to. The banter between them all is just incredible. I'm absolutely loving it. Like, I think I'm on chapter 12 or 13 out of the 18 chapters that, make up the game. And I've been streaming it and having a really, really good time with it. I'm really, really liking it. Just having a blast.
Nice. Yeah, I see you going live like almost every morning playing this game because I think you really like this a lot. So that's awesome to hear. Again, I know a lot of people have been talking about this game being like their big kind of surprise game for the year, the one they weren't expecting. Although Psychonauts for me was kind of that game. It's awesome to hear that you're having such a great time with Guardians, and it turned out to be awesome. Like, I was really worried about that game, not being that great because of all the stuff we saw, combined with the fact that like you were fighting like Jello cubes and stuff, where like at least the parts that they showed weren't really that interesting. So it gave me the impression that maybe the final game wasn't going to be super fun or interesting, but. No, it sounds like it was the opposite of that. I think they just maybe showed the wrong footage when they were doing the trailers for it.
I think that's exactly it. I think it was just they showed too much of one section rather than showing off, because there is a lot going on in this game. There's a lot of different environments, and it does a couple things where almost not exactly, but remind me a little bit of old school Metal Gear, where if you just keep kind of like punching or kicking at the problem, that's not always the solution. Sometimes you have to really pay attention to the dialogue and what the characters are talking about and trying to figure out how to actually get out of some encounters. Like, it does some really, really interesting and very clever things with its mechanics, and even throughout some of the encounters. It's Ryan, it's going to be up there for a game of the year for me at this point, and that's heavy, especially considering how many games I've really loved this year. But I'm loving it, and I hope you check it out before the end of the year, because I really do think it's worth your time.
Yeah.
But what about you, man? What have you been playing?
So I played something that I ranted and raved about on the Xbox Drive episode that went live this morning. I was very, very impressed with the game I'm about to talk about. But yeah, real quick, going back to Guardians, I'm excited to actually check it out before the end of the year. I'm going to be picking it up probably this week or next week, so that I do really want to play it at some point so we can actually talk about it, because it sounds awesome and I think I'm going to like it. But the game I played this week, my friend, was the Dark Pictures Anthology, House of Ashes. So This is the newest game in the Dark Pictures Anthology. So it's actually the third game in the series, the third game of the 8-game contract that Supermassive has with Bandai Namco. So we do know that they actually have many more of these coming. We actually talked about the next one that's coming up last week on the show, the Devil in Me, which is about this like serial killer. But Matt, House of Ashes, this newest episode, I was like, I after Little Hope came out last year, and I was so disappointed with that. I was like, okay, I'm not going to pre-order this. I'm going to wait until reviews come out before I, jump into this to see if this is going to be worth picking up, because I don't want to waste my money again and pick it up at full price and just be disappointed with it. But man, House of Ashes was awesome. I really, really loved this game. It really reminded me of Until Dawn in all the best ways. Like, it's not campy in tone or anything like that. It is a more serious story that basically takes place during the Iraq War, where essentially you play essentially characters from both sides. You play as Americans, but also Iraq soldiers that are both going to war. So basically the Americans think that they've found this hidden underground location where all of the weapons of mass destruction, in quotes, that Saddam apparently had were found. So they decide to go raid this underground location, but what they find there is actually not an Iraq army facility, but actually like this underground labyrinth of this ancient civilization full of these like ancient monsters, and they're basically trapped there and they have to escape. And they basically both sides kind of have to work together, and of course there's a little bit of tension there. But the characters are really well developed, and I just loved where the story went with it. So I had a blast playing this. I think this is Supermassive back in full form here. It gets me even more excited for the next episode, The Devil in Me, that we talked about last week, which already sounded like it was going to be pretty promising from at least the premise. But now I'm even more excited about it because this game knocked my socks off. I loved it. It took me about 6 hours to finish it. So again, it's not super long, but it's like just like in Until Dawn or their other games, it's very replayable. For the reasons of you can choose different choices, and based on your choices, people either live or die. So going back and replaying it to watch everyone die, in horrible ways, or try to save everyone, or anywhere in between. Like, there's a bunch of different, like, just looking at the trophies, there's a whole bunch of different permutations of things you could do. So I'm really excited to jump back into it again and kind of see more of it. But I loved my time with it. And for folks at home who have been holding off, who loved Until Dawn, but have been looking for the next good game from Supermassive, it's finally here. Go check it out. It's great.
Man, that gets me so excited for it because I know I was a little bit down on it, but I think it was just because I had a similar issue with it with Deathloop that like the more I saw it, the less I wanted from it just because I feel like we saw it so much. But this makes me really excited actually. Like I really liked Until Dawn and I've been looking for an excuse to kind of jump back into that kind of universe, in Supermassive style. So I might actually have to check this out, Ryan. You're giving it pretty high praise and you're getting me excited.
Yeah, I mean, it's up there also, just like you with Guardians. It's definitely probably in my top 10. And again, I really love horror games. So this is heavily slanted in that direction. And I'm just glad we finally got like a really good horror game this year, especially with Dying Light getting delayed till next year. So yeah, this game was great. Go check it out. But I'm enough about that. Let's slam the brakes on this conversation. It is time for some breaking news. And it's been a bit of a slow news week as far as PlayStation is concerned. I mean, we've got the two stories that we always talk about at the beginning of every month, and we're going to talk about those in a second, but not a lot of news going on right now. One of these stories, though, definitely breaks Matt's heart, so make sure to stay tuned for that. First up, November's PlayStation Plus games are now live, and there's a whole bunch of them this month. So we got Knockout City, First Class Trouble, Kingdoms of Amalur: Re-Reckoning, and then we got 3 PlayStation VR games that they announced ahead of time. The Persistence, The Walking Dead: Saints and Sinners, and then Until You Fall. All of those games are available right now for free, so go ahead and claim them for now. And before we get into a question about this, Matt, what do you think about this lineup? 6 games, that's pretty good.
For me personally, and I understand that I'm in a very small niche here of people who actually, like and play PSVR, I'm stoked. Just with the regular games, Knockout City was a ton of fun when we spent a bunch of time with it a few months ago. And, it was always one of those things where it's like, yeah, I'll pick it up eventually. And now getting it for free, I mean, why not? It's a good opportunity to jump back in. And from what I saw, there's like a battle royale mode and stuff. People seem to be pretty positive about the new modes and stuff. So I'm excited to jump back in. First Class Trouble looks fine. It didn't really blow me away, but it's something that I'm curious to try out with some friends, which, everything I've heard about this game is that it's really solid for the first little while and while you're learning everything. And then it's one of those things that when you learn too much, it gets kind of stale. But, I'm excited to give it a whirl. Kingdoms of Amalur: Re-Reckoning. I missed Kingdoms of Amalur the first time around and kept thinking about picking this one up as well. And I'm excited to actually give it a whirl now because I've always heard really good things. I heard good things about this remaster, so I'm curious to check it out. And for the PSVR side, I'm stoked. The Walking Dead: Saints and Sinners was a game that I've been eyeing for so long. And it was one of those things, again, where I was like, I'm going to buy it. And now, again, it's here, which I'm excited about. Until You Fall is supposed to be like a great roguelike on PSVR. I'm there as well. And The Persistence, again, I'm not the biggest horror fan, but I keep hearing about this game. So, like, for me, pretty much all 6 of these games with First Class Trouble is the only, asterisk I'll put that I was planning on picking all of them up. And now I have all 6 of them. So I'm amped. I'm really happy with this list. But what about you, Ryan? Where are you at with this?
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. First off, Knockout City, I think after playing all of the sports games this year, I was like, I was thinking when we first played it, maybe Knockout City has the potential to be the best sports game that comes out this year. And turns out it ends up being the best sports game, I think, this year that actually came out. Like, I think it's better than, NHL or MLB, which I think are like the 2 other best sports games that came out this year. So I'm really excited for more people to get a chance to play that. Although it was like on a free trial, so everyone kind of had access to it a long time ago. So, I mean, I think there's also like a big trial on EA Play as well. So at this point, like, I still think a lot of people have access to it. And then First Class Trouble, I kind of feel the same way about that with you. It's like, looks fine, I guess. But I mean, I'm never going to turn down a free game, but I'm certainly not jumping at the bit to play that one. And then Kings of Amalur: Re-Reckoning is a game that I really liked when it came out, like the original version. I will say that the game is not aged super well. So I definitely think for someone playing it for the very first time, it's definitely going to be a game that's harder to get into for sure. But it is kind of like, I would compare it to being like a more mature Fable. So if you like games like Fable on Xbox, like an action RPG that's like kind of like choice based and morality based, I think you're going to really dig Kingdoms of Amalur. I mean, it's written by R.A. Salvatore, which is actually like a really prolific writer, and then Todd McFarlane did a lot of the character design and artwork for the game. So it's a solid game, but I think just the gameplay hasn't aged super well between its original release and now. But it's a good game for people to check out. And then PSVR, I just don't have a lot to say about those because I actually don't have PlayStation VR anymore. I used to, But I found out very quickly after having it that VR actually makes me get motion sick. So I actually don't really play VR games anymore. So I don't really have a lot to say about that. Well, speaking of VR games, though, let's bring in Seamus McIsaac at Famous Seamus, who asked the question, what do you think of this month's PlayStation Plus games and the bonus PSVR games? I'm honestly surprised that the games weren't PSVR exclusives like Moss, Astrobot, Blood and Truth, or popular games like Beat Saber, Job Simulator, or Super Hot that most people with PlayStation VR would already have. So what do you think about this question? The fact that these are like lesser known PlayStation VR games, except for Walking Dead, which I always see at like the top of the charts for PlayStation VR.
Yeah, you know what? I agree with Seamus. Actually, I'm a little bit surprised that they didn't go for some more of like the big heavy hitters, but I'm actually very happy that they didn't. Just because like I feel like he mentioned, a lot of the people who have and still play PSVR probably own a lot of these games that he mentioned, like Moss, Astrobot, or Super Hot. And Beat Saber and Job Simulator are consistently in the top 10 for, PSVR top sales anyway. Like I don't really see them giving those away unless they really have to. And like, especially because with Walking Dead, that a lot of people are calling it one of the best PSVR games of the year. The persistence has been around since I think actually close to launch.
Yeah.
And it seems like it's a bit kind of slept on. And Until You Fall is a newer one as well that I'm hearing really solid things on. So I'm glad that they kind of took a more recent, with at least two of the three, games that are apparently performing well, are apparently a lot of fun, and I'm actually very excited to jump into both. So I'm glad that they went down the road less traveled a little bit more with this one, because I feel like a lot of the people who are still using it regularly probably already have a lot of the big ones, and then you'd have the cry out of, why are they giving us games we already own?
Yeah.
So I'm glad they took this route.
Yeah, for sure. I imagine that's probably what we would end up hearing. And yeah, I think that, again, you're more likely not to have these titles. So I definitely think that that's probably the best road to go down for sure with this. Well, of course, keeping it on theme with car puns, I had to throw one in there. All right. Next up, the following games are now available on PlayStation Now. We've got Mafia Definitive Edition until February 28th of next year. So you've got basically 4 months to play this, essentially. And then Totally Reliable Delivery Service, Final Fantasy IX, and Celeste. I mean, there you go. Those are your PlayStation Now games. Interesting enough, like Celeste just left Game Pass like 10 days ago and is now on PlayStation Now, which would explain why it left at this point. And then Final Fantasy IX continues the train of Final Fantasy games that we were promised a couple months ago, like a new one every month. So we've got that there. And then Mafia Definitive Edition is the only one that got a date as to when it was leaving. So we don't know when these other games are leaving the service. But that seems like a really short time frame to play that game. But what do you think about these games, Matt?
I think it's all right. I love Celeste. It's one of my favorite games of all time. So I love any opportunity to play this game again. If you have never played it and you have PlayStation Now, highly, highly recommend. It's a fantastic platformer on top of, dealing with mental health in a really significant way that I really enjoyed. Final Fantasy IX I've never played, but I've always been curious about. Totally Reliable Delivery Service. Don't really have too much to say about that. And the Mafia games have never really been my thing. I've never played 1 and 2. I tried to get into 3 and I just couldn't really get into it. So I think it's cool. I think you're right, though. I think this seems like a very, very short time frame given how many games we're getting in January and February. So if you are planning on playing Mafia Definitive Edition, probably play it before next year, because then I don't see things slowing down.
Yeah.
I think it's an okay month, though.
Yeah, I think that the games themselves are good games. I mean, to your point about Celeste, like that's one of my favorite games of the last generation. I love that game as well. The platforming was top notch. It was very difficult, but it was very rewarding in its difficulty. And then Final Fantasy IX is actually one of the best Final Fantasy games, especially if you like turn-based Final Fantasy games. Like it's definitely the best of the PlayStation era, I think. So if you're looking for like a really good turn-based Final Fantasy game, like I think that's the best one to go back to of all of the ones they've been re-releasing. Like it's definitely better to go back to than 8 or 7 or Final Fantasy X even. So I recommend definitely people check that out. And then Mafia. Yeah, it seems weird that they'd only give 4 months. And again, I just don't think it's going to be enough time to play that game, especially because like that's the type of game that you'd want to play over the summer when there's less games that are coming out instead of, in February of next year, Matt, when there's a lot of games. So yeah, I think that kind of stings a little bit. And then Totally Reliable Delivery Service looks fine. Looks interesting, I guess. But there you go. Those are your PlayStation Now games. If you're a PlayStation Now subscriber, you can go download them right now. And then last news story. It's time to break Matt's heart a bit, though, because I know this was like one of the games that Matt was looking forward to the most next year. But Marvel's Midnight Suns has been officially delayed until the second half of 2022. I mean, the team just said they just needed a lot more time with this, and that's pretty much all we got out of the post that they put up for it. Again, I think this is a good delay because originally this was coming out in March 2021, which isn't as busy as February yet, but I imagine it's going to be by the time we get all of the release date announcements kind of scheduled in. So I think it might be even getting delayed into a better window. But Matt, what do you think about this?
Yeah, I'm disappointed just in the way that I can't play it soon. Outside of that, I'm completely fine with taking more time. Especially like you mentioned, Ryan, the first few months of next year are already getting incredibly stacked. So I feel like March is going to be a lot of balance in between of catch up from January and February, while also trying to live in the sea of whatever's coming in February.
Yeah.
In March, sorry. So I'm disappointed. I have a feeling that, the more games that we're seeing kind of get delayed and the more games we're seeing announced for next year, I feel like next year might be a real, to quote Mr. Badbit, banger of a year.
Oh, he'd love that.
He'd love that, right? So I feel like no matter when it's coming out, this is a day one for me, and I'm very, very excited about it. And just, if they need more time to get things right, especially after the massive success that we're seeing, I think, with Guardians, let them take the time. I'm just sad that I can't play it soon, but
I know. It's going to be okay, though, because, again, I think it'll be a better game for it. And yeah, there will be less things to play around it. And just to throw it out there, in March of next year, we've got Gran Turismo 7, Triangle Strategy on Switch, Stranger in Paradise, Final Fantasy Origin, Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, and the current gen version of Grand Theft Auto 5. Those are all scheduled for March of next year already. And it's only going to get worse from there, Matt. So I think it's going to get delayed into a better window, I think. It's going to end up being a better move. So
I think so. And I think the only other kind of massive piece of news, Ryan, that we missed, but I think we'll have to save it for next week because I'm just seeing about it now, is there was that Elden Ring gameplay preview that went live a couple hours ago. But obviously we haven't had time to watch that. I just wanted to bring it up so that people know that, we'll talk about it next week.
Yeah, exactly. And plus it'll just be reactions to the trailer because we already know when it's coming out because it's coming out the same day as Saints Row on February 25th. And it's got a collector's edition, which looks interesting as well. But again, to your point, we'll talk about it more next week since neither of us have had a chance to check out the trailer. So, and it's 15 minutes. We don't have enough time to watch it today. So there you go.
Yep.
All right, let's let some of our friends into the car with us. It is time for the carpool. Folks at home, if you would like to have your question read on the carpool, there's a number of awesome ways to do that. Number one, follow us on Twitter at YumiCaprice. We put up a question post every single Wednesday afternoon asking for your questions, so you can leave your questions there. Or you can hit us up on the Yumi Capri Discord. It's free to join. The link is in the show notes. And you can just leave your question in the PlayStation Drive section. Just make sure to tag one of us so we know it's a question for the show. Or if you're watching us on YouTube, you can actually leave us a question in the comments of this video, and we'll answer it on the show. Also, since we're doing the live episode as well, if you're in the chat and you have a question just like Brandon Myers asked, you can feel free to ask it here, and we'll answer it in this part of the show. Just like Court Lalonde did, at Court Lalonde over on Twitter. He asked the question, and Matt, you're going to love this one. With Matt getting an Xbox, how long before this show only talks about Xbox? So, Matt, you acquired an Xbox Series X this week. You officially joined the enemy. It happened.
Yep. Yeah, well, also thanks to you. You sold me over to the dark side. But no, I'm having a lot of fun with it so far. I don't want to get too deep into it, but like now I'm getting into this interesting middle ground that I didn't have an issue with before, because for me the PlayStation was always my everything machine. It's where I played pretty much all my games. But now I'm going to be joining that. I feel like this Game Pass tango of like, is this game coming to Game Pass? Is it not? Do I wait to play it there, or am I going to play it on PlayStation? I think for generally speaking, the PlayStation is going to remain my primary main console. I'm still a Sony pony, as they say. But I'm curious to kind of dive into the Xbox a little bit more and learn a little about it. The one thing that I will say up front right away is, good Lord, the way that Xbox handles those saves is just immaculate compared to PlayStation. Hopping across from like my PC to the Series X to even my brother's Xbox One, everything is just seamless. It's there. I don't have to do anything. Well, it's like
Yeah.
You know, PS4 to PS5, I had to restart Death Stranding because my save was gone. So that's the one thing I'll say so far. But yeah, no, I'm excited to, you know, dig into a little bit more of the best of both worlds, if you know what I mean.
Of course. I mean, it all just works. That's one of the best parts about Xbox, which is why, like, I like talking about stuff like that on a show like this because it's stuff that I want Sony to, like, if they're listening, I would love to see them, you know, take on some of the ideas that Microsoft has, because they definitely have some good ideas with their console, but they also have some bad ideas. Like some things work better on PlayStation than on Xbox. So, I think they both have their strengths and weaknesses. But saves definitely is one of those things that's like way better on Xbox, or even just the way different versions of games are handled. Like you just install the game once and it knows it's, you know, the Series X version of the game. You don't have to worry about accidentally downloading the PlayStation 4 version of, you know, Spider-Man Miles Morales or anything like that. So there you go.
The other thing that kind of really quickly stands out to me incredibly so far, I just really love PlayStation's UI compared to Xbox as a whole. I feel like Xbox's UI is a little less beginner friendly. Like I get very lost in that, you know, in the UI so far. I do think PlayStation's is a bit cleaner, but yeah, no, like I said, I'll have more impressions as we go, but so far so good.
Sounds good, my friend. All right, next up, Mr. Nasty Boots, right here in the chat, asked the question: what do you want to see from PSVR 2? And is it clearly going to be called PlayStation VR 2 because it's Sony, or are they going to be pretty straight to the point when it comes to naming things? But most importantly, with what studios or IPs of Sony's would you see coming to PlayStation VR? So what Sony IPs do we see coming to PlayStation VR? And do you think it'll be called PlayStation VR 2, Matt? What do you think about the name of PlayStation VR 2?
I think so. I think it works. I don't really think they need to go for like a PSVR Next or PSVR-S, like especially because PSVR is already 4 letters jammed together. I don't really think they need to add on any more after that. So I think PSVR 2 is a pretty easy sell. But also when it comes to IPs that are going to be coming to that, I really hope we get to see some more. And I would be totally even fine with taking some older games and just slapping VR onto them. There's a lot of rumors that, you know, Horizon Zero Dawn is getting a full VR version that will be coming to PSVR 2, and I for one hope that kind of, you know, that's true. I think Horizon's easy sell, especially with, you know, the bow and arrows and different tools and gadgets that you can use. I would love to see Spider-Man in some way, shape, or form, honestly, because like while they have done those like movie tie-in PSVR things, they're bad, very very bad.
Yeah.
So I would like to see that. I would like, for me, I just want to see them get a little more risky with their VR games. And I think, you know, they were really locked out from doing a lot with the original PSVR just because of hardware limitations, which is fine. I mean, we already knew it was a testing bed for them. So I just like to see more consistent support as a whole. And I would love also Ghost of Tsushima would be so dope doing those samurai battles. You know, in VR would be awesome. But what about you, Ryan? Like what could Sony do with PSVR 2? If we put motion sickness aside for just a second, what could they do to kind of draw you in?
So again, the problem I run into is more of a personal thing, because it's just hard for me to play VR games. Like I still really want to give it a try again, because maybe it was just the selection of games I played, because it was more of the launch titles that I was playing that you know made me motion sick. But I haven't really ever gone back to VR since then. So maybe I give it another chance, and maybe PlayStation VR 2 is maybe how I go do that, or like maybe I borrow someone's Oculus Quest and just see how good that experience is, because I've definitely heard it's getting a lot better as far as you know technology has improved. So I'm hoping that it's a little more friendly for people like me who are just, you know, for like when too much motion happens, it hurts my brain and bad things happen. So I'm hoping that it's awesome. First of all, absolutely, it's going to be called PlayStation VR 2 at this point. It's Sony. They're going to totally name it that. Like, I don't see a reason why they would go complicated with the name, unless they just call it PSVR and then just not, like, you know, add a 2 to it. But I think they're just going to stick with the name and just go along with it, because it tells you everything you need to know about the product, which is exactly what you want to do in marketing. Like you don't want to make the naming too complicated, or else consumers are just like, do I really need this? Or just at the same time, don't go too simple like Wii U, where it's just like you can't tell what the product is either. So so that's what I'm hoping for. As far as IPs, Ghost of Tsushima would be a good one. I would love to see like more racing stuff. Like Gran Turismo had a VR mode, and I would love to see maybe that get more expanded with like something like Gran Turismo 7. Or maybe it's just like I would love to see just more VR game, like VR modes or VR like ways of being able to play the game in VR with just games we already play. So having it be a part of Gran Turismo 7 as an example without having to create its own separate experience. Like I would much prefer something like that versus, you know, reinventing the wheel. Like one of the games I really liked playing in PlayStation VR was Resident Evil 7 because again, it was the same game in PlayStation VR. It wasn't like a dumbed down experience or anything like that. It was the core Resident Evil experience, but just more terrifying because you had basically the experience strapped to your face, essentially.
Yep.
Also, I'm going to give a shout out to Nasty Boots in chat, who says Twisted Metal is his choice. And actually, I think Twisted Metal would be a great choice too, as well.
Yep. That would be a lot of fun. Yeah, I think that I agree with you, Ryan. A lot of the early PSVR titles, I suffer badly from motion sick, and I was like, you know, eating ginger candies with the fan on while I was playing, and like, there's a lot of ways that you can kind of help circumvent it to an extent. But I feel like as VR has gone on, they've really figured it out a lot more. Like, and there's a lot more there that even if you do get motion sick, things like Beat Saber and Super Hot, even though I am quite prone to motion sickness, never got motion sick once. So, yeah, I feel like there was a lot of testing at the very beginning that I think it's gotten better since.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm planning on giving it a try again, and we'll see. Hopefully, it's not so bad. And then last question also comes from the chat. This is from Brendan Myers, and he asked the question: if you could only play one game from the PlayStation 4, one more time, which one would it be? And then which one would you suggest to a stranger to play? So if we'd only play one PlayStation 4 game for the rest of our lives, what game would that be? Personally, that game, I mean, it's a cheaty answer because I'm cool with playing it on PlayStation 5, but it's Final Fantasy 14 because it just never ends. But if I had to go outside, if I had to branch out a little bit, Matt, if you will, I would actually probably go with Persona 5 Royal because that's my favorite game on PlayStation 4. I would love to play it again, and it'll probably never get a PlayStation 5 version. So I want to continue to be able to go back and play that game and dive into it more. So yeah, Persona 5 Royal is probably the game that I would pick. And as far as what one I would suggest to a stranger to play, I guess it just depends on the stranger. Like, it's tough with questions like these because we just don't know the person, and everyone's just so different when it comes to games as far as what genres they like and stuff like that. Like, we would need to know kind of what type of genres and stuff that the stranger would like to play. I mean, if you want my opinion on what the best PlayStation 4 game is, I think it's actually Persona 4 Royal, or sorry, Persona 5 Royal. I can't talk today. That's probably the best game on the PlayStation 4, in my opinion. But at the same time, like, everyone's opinion is totally different. So it'd be tough basically giving like a specific answer for this without knowing the stranger all that well. But Matt, what do you think about this question?
Yeah, you know what, Ryan, that was going to be my answer too, just because I love Persona. Persona 5 Royal would be the one that I would love to continue to play too, especially because how much they kind of expanded on it from the base game and how many quality of life changes that they brought in. So Persona 5 Royal would be my answer. As for one to suggest for a stranger to play, I would actually go towards something like Spider-Man or even Miles Morales, just because I feel like for the more casual gamer or for somebody who's new to the platform, Spider-Man is an easily recognizable character. I feel like Insomniac really nailed a lot of that game where even like my fiance, when I was playing it, would ask for the controller sometimes just to swing around. I think they nailed traversal and they made it so engaging in a way that even if you just, you know, getting from point A to point B can be fun. And I feel like it's an easy way to draw people in. I don't think the combat's overly difficult. I don't think the gameplay is overly complicated. I feel like it's a good entry point into gaming, especially on the PS4. And you know, the games are also stellar, so why not? So I don't know. I would probably go Spider-Man or Miles Morales.
That's actually a really good approach, and that makes a lot of sense, especially because again, a lot of people like Spider-Man. It just it depends on obviously if this person, this pseudo like imaginary person, if you will, as long as they like superheroes, they'll probably really like that game. Or even like somebody like me who doesn't even love superheroes, like I really love Spider-Man. So that's actually a really good suggestion. Although if we had to pick, which one would it be, Miles Morales or Spider-Man, Matt?
See, I would just say like the base Spider-Man, just because like I feel like starting with Miles Morales, which again does have some quality of life stuff, and it does build on the base game. Whereas like, you know, if they play the original and they're like, oh my god, I love this so much, Miles Morales is right there, and it's like I don't like it as a step back rather than, from going from Miles to the base. I just feel like I always like starting at the beginning and then moving forward rather than starting with a newer entry and then moving back, especially when it's all interconnected. So
yeah,
I would say the base Spider-Man.
For sure. And actually, I totally agree with you on that. And also, there's so much world building done in the first game that it just gives you so much more context for, why Miles is like Miles. So I actually think that it gives a lot of context for before you play Miles Morales. So definitely jump into that one first as well. Because I know, like, when PlayStation 5 came out, a lot of people actually jumped into Miles Morales first, I was seeing, and not instead of playing base Spider-Man and then going back to it. So I think that's weird. You should definitely start with OG Spider-Man first. So
yeah. And I think with PS5, it circumvents it at least a little bit because they did remaster it to some extent. They did do it like a little bit. So I think there it's a little more excusable. But since we're talking PS4, start with the original and then go from there.
Yeah, for sure. All right. That's going to do it. Looks like we don't have any other questions in chat. So, Matt, before we go, Matt plugs go.
Yeah, you can find me over on Twitter at burnout_Matt, or you can find us over at youtube.com/burnoutbrighter, where we do a whole bunch of different stuff. This week we had the amazing Sun M over talking to us about their incredible writing career. And and I will be streaming. I am streaming and continue to stream on twitch.tv/burnoutbrighter7. And I will be streaming for Extra Life next week. I got scheduled some training for work over the next couple of days, so I wouldn't be able to make Friday as I originally wanted to. But as soon as I figure out when training is next week, I will be streaming around then. So just keep your eyes peeled and I'll let everybody know.
Very nice, my friend. And again, you're going live much every day playing Guardians of the Galaxy, or almost like every other day, kind of. So go check out Matt over there on Burnout Brighter, especially if you're up in the morning, because Matt usually streams in the morning, I've noticed. So you can go check out Matt there. As for me, you can find me on Twitter at Ryan Turford. You can find us on Twitter at Yumi Capri's. You can find us on YouTube at youtube.com/Yumi Capri and on podcast services around the globe. So for Matt Sawinski, I'm Ryan Turford. This has been episode 24 of the PlayStation Drive, and we're out. The PlayStation Drive is fueled by patrons over at patreon.com/YumiCapri. And I want to say thank you to each and every one of our patrons from the bottom of my heart from your support across all of our content. And let's start by thanking our Premium producers, Dallas Ford, Lee Navarro, the fearless leader of the Phoenix Overdrive Extra Life team, and Jonathan Brown over at youtube.com/PM Entertainment. Our Platinum producers, Robbie Ballaby Miller and Trucker Sloth. And our Gold members, Argo, Brendan Myers, Dallas Robbins, Emily O'Kelly, Heather Boney, James Johnson, Joel Brooks, Jose Jimenez, Mac Time, Benji Kong, Marcus O'Neill, RJ Kern, Dano, Skinny Matt, Mr. and Mrs. Nasty Boots, Fulia Fuji, and Xavier Reyes. Thank you all for all of your support.